Okay, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're based. Thank you for joining. My name is Niamh Gallagher. I'm Senior Marketing Manager at Mindway AI. I'd like to welcome you all to this second edition of Beyond the Month, the Future of Player Protection in the US, Trends, Innovations and Challenges. So we're going to be looking at the most crucial aspects in addressing problem gambling beyond PGAM month. So we have a great panel lined up for you. I'll ask you all to turn on your cameras and unmute yourselves. Let me see, Phil, you're at the first on my screen, so I'll get you to please introduce yourself first.
Sure. Phil Sherwood, Senior Director of Responsible Gaming at PrizePicks. Formerly, I've been there for 2 years. Formerly, I was at the Mass Council for Gaming and Health and served on the NCPG board. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Paul?
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever everybody is. My name is Paul Buck. I'm the CEO and founder of Epic Global Solutions, which is a gambling harm prevention consultancy, specializing in education, awareness, consultancy, and training. And I'm also somebody who is in recovery for a gambling addiction between 2001 and 2011.
Thanks, Paul. Travis, do you want to go next?
Thanks. Hi, everyone. So my name is Travis Sztainert. I'm the Director for Research and Education at the International Center for Responsible Gaming, or ICRG. I consider myself a recovering academic, if you will. I did my PhD, my postdoc before entering into the gaming sphere. Really interested in the so what and the now what of research. So that's why I kind of call myself a recovering academic, is that I'm more interested in how to put the research into practice than I am necessarily about doing the research anymore. But hopefully I can bring some insights to this conversation. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Travis. And Rasmus?
Yep, I'm Rasmus Kjaergaard, and I'm the CEO of Mindway AI. We are a player protection solution provider, as you may know, leading one internationally, operating in the UK market space with our two solutions, Game Scanner and Gamealyze, and in 39 other countries around the world. So that's me.
Okay, thanks, Rasmus. Okay, so we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'm just going to jump straight into it. Paul, I'll go to you first. So Epic Global Solutions recently published your 2025 impact report with the NCAA. I was keen to hear some findings or what interesting kind of highlights you got from that.
Yeah, thanks, Niamh. Yeah, so we in the middle of probably the largest gambling education and awareness program ever done in world sport or colleges with the NCAA. So for those who don't know, the NCAA is the National College Athlete Association. It's 1,100 of the big colleges in the US, 500,000 student athletes at any one time. And obviously they're in D1, D2, D3, D1s being the big ones everyone will know, like Michigan and Penn State and so on, right down to D3s, which are much smaller. So, you know, we've worked with Clint Hangerook and Mark Hicks and the team there, Charlie Baker, for 3 years now. So we've, as part of PGAM and part of the month, we gave our latest report, and there were some quite interesting findings. There always is. We do this face to face, so we've now seen 350 colleges face to face over the last 3 years. And that's over 120,000 student athletes face to face. So, you know, it gives you a massive chance for evaluation. It gives you a massive chance for research and stuff like that. So what we also achieved this year, we've now worked in every state in the US. So obviously not all of them are legalized yet, but we've now been to colleges and athlete institutions in every one of the states, which is a feather in the cap for sure. So, I'm not going to go through every stat that came out in the report, but what was really clear is how gambling is becoming much more normalized in the US. You know, from compared to the figures of 3 years ago, more people are aware of it, more student athletes are doing it, and so on. And I suppose the three stats which I picked out for this were we have an element of athlete abuse. So, you know, obviously it's a growing concern with things like NAL, with betting markets and things like that. And this year, 12% of athlete abuse captured by the NCAA was gambling related. That's a huge increase on what it was 2-3 years ago. So we are starting to see some increases in that, and that's people slipping into DMs in Instagram. It's Venmo requests. I've just lost this money, so can you put it back in my account, please, or else I'll come and find you. Threatening of student athletes' families and people like that as well. So there's been an increase of that. I think an important one for this for us is 96% of student athletes could recognise the signs of harmful gambling and how to interact with teammates. Education's not a silver bullet. We know that. You need technology alongside it. You need other things as well. But education is crucially important in a country like the US, which is growing with its gambling market and the different types of gambling market it's got. For us to go in and 96% of the people we see to now say, all right, we understand what harmful gambling looks like and we know how to interact with teammates and people around us is probably quite an important stat that we're quite proud of. And then the final one was 84% had an excellent awareness of NCAA sports wagering regulations. Again, an important one. We're seeing an increased number of integrity breaches. We're seeing an increased number of student athletes doing things that they shouldn't do. And often they say, we didn't know the rules. We didn't know that we couldn't do that. We didn't know we couldn't bet on another sport. We didn't know we couldn't bet on another game other than our own. So that's an important part of that as well. So yeah, successful year. And I think they were the three stats that sort of stood out to me when I was looking through it in preparation for this.
Great. And just following on from that, because I know, we caught up with you recently at the Next Summit in New York, and you'd mentioned about the fragmentation of the US market and how that's slowly improving. Like, what do you think about kind of the current state of play in terms of the division there and how that kind of impacts consistency across different states?
Yeah, I thought about this question, knowing that you're going to ask it. And I remember I went back to a panel I sat on in 2021. When just after the pandemic, we started coming over from the UK and we're doing more and more work in the US with operators, with regulators, with sports, major leagues, etc. And I remember sort of saying on that panel, very similar to this one, that, an almost outlandish comment now that the US is just what the UK was 10 years ago. It's going to be exactly the same. You're going to ultimately have the harm coming along. You're going to have public perception changing. You're going to have, regulation getting involved, bankruptcies, etc., and so on. And I think in reality, I probably got that wrong in terms of what that market is. The US is very different from the UK in that you've got such different types of gambling there. In terms of, you've got the fantasy, obviously we've got Phil on the call today. Prediction markets. You've also got a move from a pretty established and huge black unregulated market into hopefully a regulated market where there are player protections and so on. Whereas the UK is almost going the other way now with the tax rises they've had. We're almost seeing a shift the other way from a regulated market into black unregulated markets. So I don't think they are the same. I think they're completely different for the reasons stated. But I think for me, it doesn't alter the fact that player protection running through the heart of all of it is so important if it's going to be sustainable in the long term. I know there's a talk that prediction markets aren't gambling, and that's probably a debate for another question or whatever. But player protection is so incredibly important for it to be sustainable in the US. It's a huge market, biggest in the world, 320 million people, 3,500 miles wide. 50 different states, all with different rules or no rules. So, for me, player protection is absolutely crucial. And at the moment, you've got a situation where many states are actually allocating $0 to it. It's very much on the operators who are expected to pay for this. So there's many states with $0 and also zero coordination. So yes. I think there's a big work, I'm not saying there's not a lot of effort going in, not least on people on this call, but I think there's a big piece of work to do to make sure it becomes a bit more coordinated, a bit better funded, and actually we do things the right way.
That is a great segue for me to move over to you, Phil. So, we've talked in the past and you'd expressed excitement about advances in player protection and, advising against using in-house system and how operators can leverage third-party data. Can you elaborate on that shift from moving from seatbelt era, as it was, or as it is said, to the more autonomous era in player protection.
Yeah, thank you. We are moving from the seatbelt sort of era of RG, where a player or user had to remember, to protect themselves, to more autonomous RG, where the platform can be smart enough to tap on the brakes before a collision happens. But in regards to having a third party have the system or doing a system in-house, right? Like although strong opinion about using a third party, I would say an in-house solution is better than no autonomous solution, right? If it's an either or, in-house is great. But in my experience, like these in-house player protection systems they're often built to pass an audit, whereas a third-party system like Mindway is built to protect the person and actually generate sustainability and play, right? Also, I think internal systems are much more likely to run into confirmation bias, be limited in scope. Operators are really good at building games, right? But when it comes to these player protection tools, let's just be honest, it's probably not their wheelhouse, right? To have an individual, third-party individual that is an expert on addiction, on behavioral science, right? Most operators, they're not going to have that capacity or the machine learning expertise, right? And one of the big advantages to using a Mindway or a company like Mindway is that this machine learning model has been improving now for some time. Whereas if one is building it on their own, they're limited in the data that's coming forward, and they're going to learn a lot of the lessons the hard way after lots of time has gone by that they could have easily learned by adopting another model. In regards to the third-party data, well, one of the disadvantages of just relying on player history, and it's wonderful that AI can read and see patterns where you didn't see it before, but when you have a new user come in, generally speaking, you know nothing about them. You don't have their play history. You know their age, right? Which tells you a little bit, potentially, about the level of risk that they might be bringing to the table if they're younger. But outside of that, you don't have anything. But if you can marry third-party data that you can capture on onboarding, and you can really start to get a more holistic view on that individual. Just having their phone number and using third-party data, you can get a really decent snapshot at their financial health and where they're at. Does that tell you the whole picture? No, absolutely not. But it's much better than flying blind. And so by marrying this third-party data with this very sophisticated system like Mindway AI that sees patterns where you weren't able to see it before and proactively nudges folks, you're going to get a clearer snapshot of who that individual is at the get-go, at onboarding. And that's something that's really exciting to me. And it's important that also these third-party systems be pliable enough to be able to take on data like that.
Yeah, no, makes sense. And Travis, moving over to you from a research perspective, on the data that's been gathered already, how do you ensure that it's, not just noise, because there is so much coming in, and how do you synthesize that data to get a clear picture of what actually works in player protection?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We are drinking from the fire hose, as it were, when it comes to data these days, coming in hard, fast, and from multiple sources. So I think that is one of the biggest challenges in the field right now is with more data comes more noise. And how do you get the signal from the noise? So we're not short on data anymore. The real issue is figuring it out in terms of how do you define what the signal is and then how do you detect it? So I think the shift that we all need to make is from maybe collecting more data to integrating it better, right? So instead of relying on a single source, whether it's like self-report survey or operator data, start triangulating the data, right? Behavioral data tells you one thing, financial data can tell you another thing, self-report adds another layer on top of this. None of them are perfect on their own, but if you can start combining them, you can get a much clearer picture of the individual and their risk trajectories. And speaking of which, the other piece is moving away from snapshots to trajectories. Like traditional research that we've seen done with player data has been mostly one one shot in time, maybe over a year if we're lucky. And so a single moment in time or even a couple moments in time can be very misleading. But that's how someone's behavior changes over time, is where the real insight is. So that's when you can start seeing things like escalation, stabilization, or recovery. And this is why I'm really excited with Mindway AI, because that's exactly what it does, right? It can tell how a person's behavior is changing over time, right? Given baselines, given comparisons to other individuals that are with the same demographics, right? And so you can really start seeing, escalation, stabilization, recovery, those sort of pathways evolving, which is great. And then I would say as a field, we need to be a little bit more disciplined about what outcomes we actually care about. Oftentimes I say, not everything that counts can be counted. And oftentimes what's counted is easiest. So that's what's focused on. And so a lot of the times the field's really focused on proxy measures like clicks or tool usage or how many people saw this, but those don't really always in any way, shape, or form translating to meaningful change. And so we need to be asking questions like, are we actually reducing harm? Are we changing behavior in a meaningful way? There needs to be a move away from good intentions to actual outcomes, right? To actually protecting the player. And then the last thing I would say that's kind of relevant in terms of data, and I'm a big proponent for, is standardization. So right now, there's a lot of data sets out there. They're speaking different languages. Interoperability of these systems is a real issue. But if you want to learn at scale, there needs to be sort of shared frameworks or metrics so that you can compare and synthesize findings. Because right now, it's comparing a lot of apples to oranges. And so, they say that the only thing better than a perfect measure is a standardized one. We still have a long way to go in terms of a field on that, but hopefully we can get there someday. So, for me, the next phase of research isn't just about more data. It's really looking to try to integrate and connect the data we already have in a way that tells us what works for whom and under what circumstances.
Thanks for that, Travis. And Rasmus, that leads me really nicely into my question for you, because with the amount of data that is there, how can that be used in the right way by operators for improving interactions? And in addition to that, how can AI be used in that way as well?
Yeah, so I think you nail it there, Travis, with the data challenge. Apart from providing all of what the two of you have just described on a daily basis, we have also seen that we needed to build significant capabilities just to understand the data formats of gambling operators. And it seems to us that they are almost, let's say, unique per operator. That's it. There's very few similarities done in different ways. Big differences, small differences. But that said, but then curating this and building into such solutions where we want to achieve this holistic view of the individual gambling behavior is of course part of it. And when I say you nailed it, Travis, is that our philosophy and what we have built our interactions and upon our detection is based on, of course, that gambling behavior is an individual human behavior. Behind every customer ID, there is a human being. And obviously, individual human behavior is in its sense individual. And that's the challenge when you then want to try to figure out what is the proxy, what is the target to train the algorithm upon. So that's why we combine it with human psychological assessment, as you may recall. So for improving interactions, I think the core capabilities around tracking at a not just a decent level, but the best way we could think of and strive to keep and maintain and improve that every day was point number one. And then from there, with the different types of analysis and development over time, look into how could we then and how can we then improve the ways interactions are done with most of our operators already using our functionality, of course. either because the operator do not have to but want to. I'm referring to, for instance, operators in the North American market space, whereas in other places in the world, it's also because the operators actually have to due to regulation. But nevertheless, we see that the key functions in Mindway we have introduced somewhat recently is that we also have now functionality that we, in the player view, where we also see that development and have a time scale where you can travel back and forth in time and see the whole gambling behavior unfold in front of your eyes. We also right there measure the efficacy of each interaction done. And I think that's a huge part. It's not necessarily sophisticated research-based IT AI algorithmic functionality, but very relevant operationally to figure out what did this interaction actually cause a change or not in the gambling behavior. That said, there are algorithms underneath it to measure that, but we measure it right away, and that is done on a more, let's say, bulk integration way with our current operators. However, we have some exciting plans for this year, which I really can't talk much about, but it is on the interactions area, because we want to basically we want to also do much more about what it's all about in player protection on the interactions, as we already do on tracking of the gambling behavior. So basically what I can say is it will be awesome. So stay tuned. Sorry for the confidentiality at this point.
Do you have an estimated date at least? Because I'm eager.
Not yet, Phil. It's too early to say, but we have exciting plans.
I mean, but this is one of those areas, Rasmus, that I think people misunderstand how AI can be used in player protection, and Mindway in particular. These proactive messages and being able to really measure what works and what doesn't. I think a lot of people just assume, oh, you're putting a label on a player as whether they're high risk or low risk, right? And that it stops there, or it's just helping you decide when to cut people off. That is just a fraction of what this can do, but that's what people fixate on. And sort of what you guys are developing and what this technology is allowing is, I think, laying the groundwork for some of the most impactful reforms and changes and best practices to come forward in the next 3 to 5 years because of this. It's exciting.
But as an operator, I would say to you, Phil, we do it together, because in my view, what is very often very, very underestimated is actually the operational factor. How do you do it? We provide the tools, but we don't do the interactions for you. You do that. But if we give you the best possible tools to do that, you do it better. You do it more in all sorts of better optimized ways, and with more multifaceted opportunity to follow the customer on the customer journey to mitigate earlier, which is also beneficial for the business as a whole.
Just on that topic, Travis, to move back to you about the messaging, how can we improve message testing to determine which actually resonates with players and which doesn't?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, on the messaging front, I think, there's been a lot of research that's being done. Now it's about putting it into practice. So I think the first thing we need to do is stop treating RG and RG messaging like it's a compliance exercise, right? Stop doing the bare minimum, putting the little disclaimers after an advertisement or on the bottom of a website, and actually start treating it like an intervention that can either work or cannot work. And right now, a lot of the messaging and in the research and the testing relies on self-report. We might ask people like, did you hear the message? Did you like it? Did you think it was funny? Do you think it's helpful? That's a great starting point, right? And marketing research definitely has a place for understanding what makes an ad attractive or what makes messaging attractive, but it doesn't tell you if it actually changes behavior. And so I would say the first shift is more towards behavioral outcomes, like, are people actually doing something differently when they get that message or intervention? Are they using the tools more efficiently, maybe, or effectively? Are they slowing down their behavior? Are they setting limits? Are they taking breaks? The second piece is that we need to start testing the messages in real world environments. Like lab studies are great, they're useful for proving causality, but when people are in the moment, really gambling impulsively, as we might say, or in the zone, does the message work, right? It doesn't really. Labs don't capture the context in which people actually see those messages, and so we need more sort of A/B testing within live platforms to see how messages actually work or don't work in real time. Personalization is a big one. Segmentation, audience segmentation. So Gainsbury's done some great work on this, showing that that the single message doesn't work. That a young sports bettor and a long-term slots player, they're gonna want different messages. They prefer different messages. Different messages are more or less effective depending if you segment the message to their playing style. So we need to tailor messages based on behavior, risk level, moment-to-moment contact, those sort of things. And then probably the most important factor is timing, right? Like, you can have a perfectly designed message, but if it's just sitting on the bottom of a website or if it doesn't get to them at the right time, it's not going to land. So, there's a real opportunity, I think, especially at the operator level and with things like Mindway AI, to trigger messages at meaningful movements, right? To have interventions that happen with the right timing. So maybe after a loss streak or when somebody's behavior starts to shift, that's when they get a tailored message meant for them that's relevant to them, and they'll be more likely to uptake that message and then do something about it. So, of course, you always need to be there always needs to be measurement, because you never know, you could have unintended effects, right? That's that was part of the arguments with people having time limits, is that they start gambling more as they get towards the end of their time limit because they are worried about being cut off, so their play escalates, right? So there can always be unintended consequences, and for example, in messaging, like message fatigue could be one, or reactance, where it's like you can't tell me what to do, or even it's like, oh, they're watching me, right? Big brother sort of concerns around pushback around being told what to do, or autonomy. So that's all to say. The future of messaging isn't necessarily just about better wording. It's about better timing. It's about better targeting, and I would argue, from a researcher perspective, much more rigorous testing would be great.
But also, can I add, in our view, also potentially differentiate on the channels you are sending the message to the different target groups with, because I'm definitely less easy to catch on TikTok, whereas my 20-year-old son can't be caught on an email, for instance.
Yeah, we got to start advertising more on LinkedIn for you, Rasmus.
Well, that could be an opportunity, actually.
The room for improvement here, I think, can't be overstated. It wasn't just a couple of years ago. I was in British Columbia at a conference where I forget what the entity was, but they did some deep focus groups on the issue of self-exclusion and timeouts, and looked at the typical messaging that they were using up there, which really wasn't that different than the messaging used in North America, right? It really looked the same. And they tested 6 or 7 messages, and the message that resonated the least, that people rejected the most, was the prevailing message that the industry has been using, that regulators have been using. And that was just really illuminating, that my goodness, we're leading with our chin here. We have a lot to learn, and it's important that we measure it. And before tools like this, where you could really personalize it in an effective way and then measure it, as an operator, as a regulator, to switch up the message, you were taking enormous risk, right? Because it may be less effective. And so, just again, wonderful, I think, opportunities lie ahead to close that gap and actually make an impact with these individuals in a personal way.
Paul, did you want to come in on that before I move on to the next point?
Well, I mean, I agree with much of what's been said, which I know is boring for a panel like this, but I think it's absolutely right. I mean, we do a lot of work on interactions face to face with operator staff. So we've got an interactions masterclass that we've worked with 14 of the 16 biggest operators in the world on, but that's kind of the people who have a human interaction with customers. And then obviously you have to do that alongside technology. And I think the other thing that came to mind as we were talking was the work we'd done on ARC together, Rasmus, with Entain and with BetMGM, which was that very much that real-time messaging. We'd work very closely on timeouts, reality checks, all the different kind of tools that you could have, and that was designed to be, or is designed to be, real-time interventions on players as they play. And you know, the work done on that hopefully hasn't been wasted, and we were always very encouraging that should be shared, weren't we, Rasmus, across the market? And I think it was to a degree, but yeah, I agree. I think that kind of human side we do, along with the technology that's out there as well, it needs to be inbuilt into everybody's customer journey who's gambling, basically.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that, Paul. I want to go back to something that was mentioned earlier. I'll go to you, Phil, on this big topic, not only in the US, but worldwide, about prediction markets, obviously. With the blurred lines there between gambling, financial, and prediction markets, how or what kind of player protection framework do you foresee for those in the near future? And in addition to that, what kind of guardrails do you see coming, you know, for the gambling industry in the US, and how can operators prepare and advocate and work with regulators on them?
Yeah, although prediction markets, which is very much the 400-pound gorilla in the room, right? They, for now, are considered to be legally distinct. There's significant evidence to suggest that the framework, the RG framework that works for traditional gaming, daily fantasy sports, online sports books, can apply to this new product in many ways. And and actually, because of Mindway AI, we do have a predictions product. We'll be able to learn how different those audiences really do react. Do they react with those tools and those games or predictions market products in the same way they do our fantasy product or online sportsbook? We don't know yet. I suggest probably yes, they do. Where is it going? Listen, public sentiment right now is really growing. There's the scrutiny on the industry is growing. Public opinion appears to be moving in a direction of supporting stricter regulations, especially as it pertains to advertising. Like when you think about what the TV looked like, what TV commercials looked like in 2018 in the US versus what they look like now, you wouldn't even recognize the landscape. Just an overproliferation, arguably, of these ads, and the public sees that. And I think anecdotally, and this is one of the benefits of the work that's been done, I think, over the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years longer, the public now understands that gambling addiction is real, generally speaking, right? Where so long it seems like the debate has been spent on, like, is it a choice? Is it a moral failure? Is it really, like, that horse has left the barn. I think the public generally understands that it's an addictive product, much like alcohol. However, policy hasn't caught up with that at the federal level, in many cases with the state level. We have an opening here. I mean, this is one of the things that both parties are starting to agree on as well, right, here in the US, in terms of wanting to have tighter guardrails to protect consumers. But in terms of the player protections for predictions, that's really unclear. We don't know where they're going. The CFTC, they're exploring new protections and regulations. You know, my opinion is if they don't do something more than they're doing now, it really is going to reflect poorly on the industry and could be a threat on the industry and its sustainability. Because right now in the online sports book, you have a framework that could be improved, but pretty much people are abiding by it. DFS, right? Traditional casino, lottery. With the predictions market, it's operators creating it out of thin air by themselves, by and large, right? In our case, we did our best to carry over the tools, those player protections and consumer protections that exist on the DFS side to the prediction side, right? It's the right thing to do from a corporate citizen standpoint, but we're not required to under the CFTC.
Yeah, but I think you're right. It's early days, but it will be quite interesting to see those comparisons when we know more.
But if I could actually add to that, so my apologies. One point I wanted to make: although they're legally distinct, the users aren't making a distinction,
Mm.
right? They're seeing it as one and the same. Where, what is it, 97, 98% of the activity on predictions markets it relates to sports, right? That's really telling, and that could evolve over time. And a lot of that, again, they're legally distinct, but the financial literacy, like the reason some of these younger folks are engaging in the products, is the wrong damn reason. They see it as an investment. They think the more they play, the more they engage with the tool, the more likely they are to win. No, that's not the case. And this is a real challenge because they view the products the same and the financial literacy is relatively low, especially with young males. It's a huge challenge for us.
There's a huge education piece then needed around that as well. Leads me into my next question, which is quite timely, Rasmus, I'd say, with the World Cup approaching. And it's going to be bigger than ever. Is it nearly double the teams? What
50% more teams?
Yeah,
it's expanding from 32 to 48 teams.
What do you see, or how do you imagine that this will impact betting behavior and player protection, and what can operators do to prepare for this?
Yeah, so 16 more teams. I'm a huge soccer fan. I'm from Europe, Denmark. Unfortunately, we are not one of the 48 best teams that could qualify this year.
We're not either.
Italy is not either, unless they get a wild card. But let's see how that turns out. I believe England is. What about the home? What about the host countries? Canada, are they? I don't know. I haven't followed that. Sorry about that. That was a side comment. So it will be a huge event. And with 16 more teams, 48 teams, there will be 50% more national teams to bet on, more games as well to bet on. I saw recently a prediction of I don't know how accurate it was, and I have disclaimer, I haven't fact checked it, which I obviously should, but a total expectation of as much as $150 billion in total global wagering, which that's in 2022 the estimated total of global wagering was $35 billion. So that's 4.25 times more wagering volume. So obviously that will increase betting significantly this summer compared to both other summers and other earlier World Cups, other types of seasonality, and obviously preparation and awareness campaigns must be already in the planning to consume the pressure that will be on this traffic, because it's just sound quite huge. What we have done at Mindway AI is, I think, two specific initiatives. First and foremost, we have started for all our hosted customers. We have a solution variant of our game scanner that is hosted by us. We have prepared ourselves for plans to ensure that the extra wagering can actually follow through in our infrastructure, so we can keep the tracking of the gambling behavior for those customers at the same level. And we also recently, not due to this, but have it now, people work off hours 24/7 to support should there be any kind of constraints of this. The other thing is that we are just about to complete the development of a new self-test variant. We have this Gamealize self-test as a card game. Mid-May, we release the new Gamealize soccer variant in timely manner to be able to deploy it to whoever would want it prior to the World Cup starting almost mid-June. So I think there's quite a lot there, but for RG operational teams, there will also be more to handle given the huge increase of this event size, in my view.
when we have big events like this at PrizePicks, whether it be the Super Bowl or March Madness, we see a big spike in first-time users.
Yeah.
Right. So I would imagine that the World Cup definitely checks that box.
Yeah, and in particularly because the World Cup is in the US, which is let's be fair, soccer is not the biggest sports in the US, but due to the event and that American culture in general are very much liking huge, very nice events, and you're pretty good at creating all those events. That might be even exponentially, actually. I just realized.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of people betting with their hearts instead of their heads too, when you think about the sort of the nationalism that goes into it, right? I see it with my own buddies at the watering hole when it's the local hometown team. Their normal rational judgment goes out the window because their hearts take over, and you wonder that whether that plays into this a little bit, and some of these first-time users being a little more vulnerable.
Yeah, we definitely have that in England, Phil. We always think it's coming home every major competition, but it's actually been about 60 years since we actually won something. But yeah, I get that. We bet with the heart.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the results that come out of it after the summer. So maybe we'll have another podcast after that to chat about it. Travis, I'll come back to you because ICRG recently announced a partnership with RGC, and I just wanted to hear a little bit about that and what initiatives that you might have planned.
Happy to chat about that, but before I do, Canada is a Group B, apparently, and we're facing Bosnia, then Qatar, and then Switzerland. So we'll see how that goes.
Oh, you have a chance then. You have a chance. As I recall, it also actually a decent national football team. Oh, soccer team, sorry. Yeah.
I'm going to take it. I should know more. I mean, I don't.
Not necessarily the worst.
Yeah, hockey, baseball kind of guy, but I will. I'll definitely tune in for those. So yeah, no. In terms of our partnership, it's really at a high level doing more of that. So what now? What, right? It's closing the gap between sort of research and practice, right? So there's a lot of great research being produced. Doesn't always, hardly ever makes its way into actual player protection at the ground level. It's not, actually designed and implemented. But on the flip side, there's a lot of happening in practice that actually isn't informed by the latest evidence. So one part of the partnership is collecting those worlds, right? That includes we're going to do things like cross-promote each other's conferences. RGC just had the Discovery Conference. It was amazing. I just went to that. It was some really good thoughts. We're going to share insights across our networks, right? They have Canada. We have a lot of the US, although we're international. We are, I would say, US heavy. But also making sure we're not having the conversations in silos, right? Silos are useful. So the whole point of silos at an organizational level is it allows ideas to mature. And it keeps boundaries stable, so people aren't stepping on each other's toes. Everybody knows what they're doing. Silos are perfectly good. The problem is when reinvention of the wheel happens, right? And so the idea is to make those silos as transparent as possible, to be aware of what each other's doing, so that we can work together at the end of the day, right? I mean, I think that's there's this word that goes around, co-opetition. You know what I mean? And people used to assume that ICRG was in co-opetition with all these other responsible gambling organizations or different organizations. We're not. We're absolutely not. We want to work together. A rising tide lifts all ships. Like you will see, actually, we're just going to announce another partnership with another organization, and I don't want to announce it before it's officially announced, but another organization that is very interested in responsible gambling and knowledge mobilization and taking research and putting it into practice. So we're doing. Stay tuned for that. But I think with the Responsible Gambling Council, especially, there's strong alignment on priority areas. Particularly around youth gambling. You'll see that the Responsible Gambling Council. I don't know if you've been on their website, but they also announced a partnership with GRIO, and they're developing a comprehensive youth prevention framework. So that's really great. And what's interesting about that is not just based on research, but it also incorporates youth perspectives, people with lived and living experience, the realities of digital environments, social media, gaming, all the things that youth are dealing with right now. So I don't know. I think broadly speaking, what we're trying to do is move forward towards a more integrated approach to RG and player protection. One that aligns, research, implementation, policy, build together a more consistent I don't want to say standards, but pillars around RG that are evidence informed. And some people might know here that I'm also on the steering committee for the Better Gambling Forum, which is a global initiative that is also trying to do the same thing, get operators, regulators, policymakers, treatment providers, researchers together in the same building, ideally. I think that our next big thing will be at the G7 in Paris, or it's in France, actually. But to talk about, what is needed in RG, how do we build a framework that makes sense, and what are the core pillars of RG so that other jurisdictions can learn, especially those that are maturing, but even of those that are matured, what are the lessons learned, right? So they don't reinvent the wheel. How can we work together? What does the menu of options of RG look like? It would be great to have that. So that's part of the goal.
I like your take on the silos. I think that is, it sounds like a really useful way and interesting way to look at it. So yeah, Paul, I'm going to come to you because we talked about before about emphasizing player protection, every day of the year rather than just a short-term focus. And obviously, this is what the title of the webinar is about. How do you think that operators or maybe other businesses in this sphere can really kind of adopt that approach consistently?
I think I grew up in a country where we had Safer Gambling Week recently, sort of October or November, and it's like 7 days where operators would really talk about the efforts that they're making. They'd give 25% of advertising space to safer gambling messages or responsible gambling messages, etc. But it tended to be in the early days, I think, a few years ago, kind of, you'd have that week where everyone would talk about everything, and then that's it then for another 52 weeks before, you start talking about it again. And thankfully, that's changed quite a lot. In the US, you've got it slightly different. It's PGAM in March and RGEM, Responsible Gambling Education Month, in September. But I think the key for me is I'm not against those months. Those months give an added focus. They give an added an added focus on the messaging or on collaborations. A lot of partnerships are announced in March. A lot of reports are released and everything else like that. So that emphasis is probably a positive thing because it does give extra space for it and bandwidth for it. But I think we've got to get away from the fact that RG is separate from the rest of the business. That RG team sits in a little office way away from the rest of the business. We don't really talk to them. They're profit eaters, and they just affect our bottom line and so on. I think those days are hopefully gone, and that was very definitely what I came across when I first started working in this space in 2013, 2014. They were seen as a pain in the ass, basically. Whereas now I think it is, to be a sustainable business or a sustainable operator or a sustainable industry even, player protection does need to be taken much more seriously. And I think Travis has actually hit the nail on the head. And I know Phil and Rasmus are big believers in this, and that's collaboration. Making sure that the researchers are talking to the educators, who are talking to the tech companies, who are talking to the operators, and working together for the common goal. With the really key thing is just do the right thing. Gambling operators, gaming operators, the whole industries, they can be profitable. They can keep people enjoying the play. They can be sustainable industries, but just do the right thing and make sure that 1, 2, 3% or whatever it is. I was certainly one of. We're keeping that number low. We're doing everything we can to try and avoid that. So I think collaboration's key, and just making sure it's a day-by-day thing, not 1 or 2 months a year.
Thanks.
One of the things that
go on.
Check it out. One of the things that PrizePicks has done, like we weren't any more active than say the other operators during PGAM or Responsible Gaming Education Month, but we really tried to build an internal RG culture. And we try to measure it. And actually, Paul, this is where Epic has come in for us. We do an annual anonymous RG survey where we basically survey our staff. And it's to solicit ideas. Sometimes, ask them to identify Achilles heels, concerns that they have, but just measure where we're at as an organization within their own jobs, where they feel it values for themselves, where as a company does it value. And, the goal is to hold steady or move it up. The first time we did it, I believe it was high 80%, said we had a strong RG culture. That's a wonderful baseline. hope we can build on it. And we have going to have another survey on the field, in the field, to do that as well. So really, it's like you said, there's been times where I got a little annoyed by PGAM because it did feel like a box check for some operators and regulators, and it's important and it does drive awareness, and you got to start somewhere. But there have been times when I'm just like, well, why are you stopping in the first of the next month? Like, why can't we keep it going? Maybe not the same pace. And that's something we try to do at PrizePicks. We have an RG committee that, well, meets regardless of the month, right?
Great. Rasmus, did you want to come in on that?
Actually, it was a comment to Paul's future experience of revenue eaters in the RG departments, where we actually now have come to a place where if operators actually use the software as it is intended, we now actually have up to operators saying publicly, with us even nudging them, that due to the de-risk of the overall database, the lifetime of the customer expands so much that the lifetime value definitely exceeds the revenue eaten, to give your narrative, and you utilize and protect actually also your insanely high acquisition costs. So I wouldn't call it add to the bottom line, but basically it is. But at least it's not the reality is not anymore that you lose customers to RG tracking solutions. You might lose more customers actually to self-exclusion or to addiction.
Yeah. Travis, just before we wrap up, do you want to come in on that, on, you know, how operators can keep that momentum going beyond PGAM?
Yeah, I think, you know, operators have done a great job of implementing tools, right? But oftentimes RG is seen as sort of a standalone, right? It's like a point in time, like, oh, we did the RG thing and it's done. It's not. It's not to be seen as a standalone or a point in time. It's a process, and it's ideally a layered process, a process that involves messaging, that involves tools, that involves ongoing conversations, that involves tracking, that involves, you know, there's so many things. And the last 10 years of the research has really been around, you know, creating the tools and figuring out which tools work and which ones don't. And so now I would argue that the next 10 years in terms of research is really going to be around that. Again, I hate to use the buzzwords integration, but figuring out how they work together, figuring out how they're layered together, you know, what's best for an individual, right? Is it all the options, just some of the options? Is it, you know, behind the scenes? Is it at the forefront? You know, I think the field overall, it's great because it is shifting from awareness to precision. And so we know a lot more than we did for 5-10 years ago. But the real challenge going forward for operators and for us researchers and everybody in the field is applying the knowledge that has been gained in a way that's targeted, that's effective, and that will ultimately make a difference. And that's what I'd say.
Yeah, shifting from awareness to precision. I like that. Okay, I think we'll leave it there. We're just about up time. So I'd like to thank you all. So thanks, Phil, Paul, Travis, and Rasmus for joining today. Thanks, everyone else, for joining. We've, of course, recorded the webinar, so that will be made available over the next week. If anyone has any questions, you can send them on to us at contact@mindway.ai, and we'll make sure that they're forwarded to the appropriate person. But yeah, thank you all again, and have a nice rest of your days.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.